Now, let's take a look at the importance of sales in banking. And that's a huge thing. Now, I can tell you just from my standpoint, all of us have been to a bank. I've had great interactions at banks, but I can tell you my most memorable stories at banks have been of not great interactions. And that's key because the importance of sales in banking, if you really understand what banks are all about, you begin to get the sense that we need to have a better interaction at banks. And that's actually, with all the millions they spend on marketing and advertising, for the break point to be what happens when you're in front of a service person at a bank, for that to be the break point if something bad goes on, it really kind of takes a wad of those millions and throws it in the garbage. So let's just define for a moment here what that is. So I'm going to read this to you, and you'll also be able to read it going forward, but I just want to give you a quick sense of it. In the competitive industry of banking, banks need to enter new markets and win new customers. Now that's key, because there's no way to do that except to spend a bunch of money on advertising and marketing, but also when a person comes in to realize the vision of what they've seen in those commercials and all the other interactions, it comes down to being able to do this in a very personal way. Enter new markets and win new customers. But even more important is the need to increase the loyalty of current customers. We'll dig into that a little bit going forward. Okay? So sales in banking really means all client customer facing roles. Everyone's focus is on gaining new and retaining current customers and clients. Now let's think about that for a second. Again, at the risk of being redundant, but I want to make sure we kind of nail this. Who among you haven't had a situation where you've looked at your statement, something's not quite right, you call the bank, and you get a dismissive person? At that moment, do you want to deal with that bank? I can tell you now, I can go to a Starbucks and I can toss out that question, has anyone here had a bad experience at a bank? And I will get probably 9 out of 10 people telling me they have. I can actually walk into any store, a Dunkin' Donuts or something, and I can say, man, I'm so upset. I just left my bank and I couldn't get a straight answer out of them on 2 different important things. And I will more than likely get a majority of people to actually commiserate with me and join in with me to tell me about their bad experiences as well. So the reason I'm hitting that point here is I want you to understand that if the most important thing that a bank has to do is to acquire new customers and enter new markets, that the customer experience, the client experience becomes the most important thing. Actually more important than features, because all the banks are generally competitive. If you can get no bounce at one place, you can get it at another place. So it comes down to the individuals and how they interact. Got to get that straight in order to understand this particular industry and what your role might be there. Let's take a look. So where do bank sales roles fit in? A moment ago I showed you an illustration, a triangle, and gave you a sense of how that associates with the layout of banking, with the layout of sales in general. Let's look at how that applies to banking, okay? So at the lower end of this, it's really simple. We're talking about tellers, branch services, customer service representatives within the banking structure. Again, they represent the larger amount of employees. They also represent the most, immediate sort of interactions with customers. Those customers tend to be coming in with immediate needs. I need to check my balance. I need to deposit something. I need to get a question answered. Those kinds of engagements, they're coming in again for those, and that's the area where they're going to come in. If you think about it from the standpoint that we talked about before in terms of what you need to have as a skill set, it's still the same. It's absolutely the same. So the folks at the bottom of this, the larger segment of people, are again using fewer of these skills. The more of the skills that they have, the better. But again, in any one transaction, you're not having to prepare differently for that transaction versus customer number 22 or 30 or whatever that number is for that day. They all tend to come in with a narrow set of requirements that you've seen before, but it's important that you understand that even at that point, what you're doing is you are really satisfying the matched need that goes to what they believe they bought from the bank. So that might be a combination of the ads they've seen It might be a combination of the needs they have that have been met before or the needs that weren't met before. You are the realization of that because you're in that level. But again, from a prep standpoint, not much more to do than to understand your basic job. When you go one step above that, business services, investment advisors, people who do mortgages, that sort of thing, and there's much more than that, but just a few of those things. You at that point will have to prepare for individual customers. You will have to answer questions that are for the individual customers. You may have to have very specific proposals. You would not want to have a loan response for one customer when it belongs to another, obviously because the two customers are different and they're entitled to different things and they're entitled to custom treatment. So again, if you look at the skill set over here, strategy skills, sales, all the things that are here, sales cycles, they become more important here than they are here. Again, if you're thinking about it from an advancement track sort of perspective, if you're here, you'll want to acquire a new set of skills or augment the skills you have in order to be here. What you will hear people say in any organization is, I'm here, I don't understand why I can't be here. And the reason is typically there's some amount of skill sets that you need to not only acquire, but you need to also demonstrate in your current position that will help you be ready for the next position. So again, going forward, what we want to have you do is understand very specifically. We're talking about banking in this case, but this is no different if, again, we're talking about cars. If you're the inside sales guy at a car lot, or and you want to be the fleet guy, you'll have to acquire a new set of skills to do that, because you'll need to know how to go outside and acquire customers and present the benefits to those customers in a concise sort of way. At the top, again, we're using banking as an example here. There are wealth services, private banking, the guy or the girl who handles the $1 million client, who might be a wealthy business person, they might be the head of a business, they might just be a wealthy person. But they have a different set of needs, and because those needs are different, you will have to have a very different approach than you will here. It just stands to reason that this transaction, which is simply a transaction, you'll prepare differently up here for this transaction, because these transactions here are worth, again, a whole lot more. The demands on you as the service person for that is a whole lot more, and you need to understand that going in. So again, compare the two. Smaller set of skills, smaller, narrower set of demands on you as it correlates to this particular position. Broader set of skills as it relates to the positions here in the middle. Absolutely broad set of skills. In other words, a full toolbox of skills and knowledge as it relates to this. And the risk also tends to be exactly that same way. The people here, if you do something wrong here, not only does the bank lose, but that person loses, and the bank loses twice. They lose the money, they probably lose the client, and it also probably puts you back in the job market. So again, just want you to understand this relationship, and you can, again, insert any business of your choice. As a matter of fact, one of the suggested exercises would be any industry going forward that you're interested in and you're thinking about sales, think about it in this way. So you can look at ads in a paper, you can look at ads on monster.com, for example, or any place, and begin to understand where these jobs fall, and begin to understand what your demands and needs and requirements will be, and begin to assess whether you have these, and if you don't, then put together a track to get them. There are literally thousands of books about sales. There are some recommended ones that we'll put together for you to be able to understand how to take that approach.